I'm excited to share with you my trip to the Huntington Library to see the exhibition Inspiring Walt Disney, the Animation of French Decorative Arts. This museum is located in San Marino, California, about 30 miles away from Disneyland, and this exhibit is running from December 10th, 2022 to March 27th, 2023, and originally premiered at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It explores the similarities between European art and French motifs with something most of us are much more familiar with, Disney films and theme parks. Rococo art, porcelain figures, and French architecture are woven together with the movies Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Beauty and the Beast to show the connection and inspiration of old and newer forms of art. The exhibition features about 50 works of 18th century European decorative art and design with hand-drawn production artworks and works on paper from the Walt Disney Animation Research Library, Walt Disney Archives, Walt Disney Imagineering Collection, and the Walt Disney Family Museum. I am so impressed by the obvious research and time the staff put into this exhibition. This is my favorite I've ever seen, and I hope I can portray to you how inspiring it is in person. Both Rococo art and Disney's creations are known for being fantastical and loved by both adults and children due to their shared goal to show the illusion of life. Here we begin by exploring the concept of animating the inanimate, specifically porcelain. From 1929 to 1939, Disney released the Silly Symphony series, 75 short films that served as the studio's experimental laboratory. Animals, plants, and inanimate objects quickly took the lead roles. The China Shop and the Clock Store are two of these shorts, both featuring porcelain, which was popular in 18th century Europe, and the key part of the Rococo style, combining curves with asymmetry with pastel colors and playful ornaments. Originally from China, Europeans loved porcelains and even had a popular ballet about a prince turning into a teapot in 1739, ahead of the Disney films made 2 centuries later. Here are sketches from the short animated Disney cartoon The China Shop, released in 1934 in the Silly Symphony series. It features a dancing clock couple. Albert Herder, born and raised in Zurich, was assigned character design and layout for the China Shop and gave it its dramatic look. The China Shop features porcelain couples as main characters, as well as vases, teapots, and plates that have been animated to life. The design of 2 dancers, porcelain figures from 1758, is similar to the designs from the China Shop, as well as the 2 opera singers, a porcelain piece from Germany, circa 1749 to 1750. Here, the porcelain piece, The Magic Lantern, circa 1760, illustrates children of the time's love of imaginary play, showing a girl peering into a magical lantern, which was an early type of image projection. Next, we will explore Walt Disney's personal experience with Europe. He first stepped foot in France on December 4th, 1918, just 3 weeks after the end of World War I. As a Red Cross ambulance corps driver, he was stationed outside of Versailles, then to Paris, and later Neufchâteau. He was in Europe for a year and later started his animation studio in 1923. He returned to Europe in the summer of 1935 for a grand tour across England, Scotland, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy. He brought back 335 illustrated books for the studio's research library. Disney returned to Europe many more times throughout his life for research, references, and his growing collection of miniatures. One of Walt Disney's special interests was miniatures. Miniatures were one of the things that first inspired Disneylandia, which eventually led to Disneyland, and Disney had more than 1,000 miniatures that spoke to his love of the whimsical, the picturesque nostalgia, and the creation of new worlds, some purchased by him in Europe. And here are some books Disney collected on his 1935 trip, which were mostly fairy tales, fables, and bedtime stories. The illustrations were used as visual resources for the studio's artists and continue to be consulted even today. Here is the miniature album with photographs of Paris from Walt's military trip to France in 1918, and the Order of Legion of Honor bestowed on Walt Disney in 1936 for France's appreciation of Disney's cinematic work. In 1940, Mary Blair joined the Walt Disney Studio, a creative that's helped guide the aesthetic feel of the animated features in the 1940s and 50s and took artistic lead on Cinderella. This room begins by walking up to 24 drawings representing 1 second of hand-drawn animation, like that of Cinderella's iconic transformation, which is known as one of Walt Disney's favorite scenes of animation. Bianca Majoli and Josephine Redinger were among the first women to work in Disney's story department and produce these early sketches of Cinderella. They represent a satirical take in the opulence and femininity of the 18th century court costume. Next is concept art for Cinderella done by Mary Blair. And here is concept sketch of Lady Tremaine's bedchamber and the stepsister's bedroom, attributed to Ken Anderson. Here are some background paintings from Cinderella, including the stepsisters and Lady Tremaine's bedrooms. And next, we start our exploration into the next French-inspired Disney film, 1959's Sleeping Beauty. Originally a story by Charles Perrault, an influential literary figure at the court of Louis XIV, who published a number of fairy tales at the beginning of the 18th century. The unicorn tapestries designed in Paris in about 1500 were a significant starting point for the film's visual development. Here are the illustrated pages from the prop storybook from the opening of the film Sleeping Beauty. Next are some story sketches for Sleeping Beauty done by Avon Earle, and here is some concept art for King Stephen and the Queen done by Kay Nielsen. In Power and Crinoline, Old Fairy Tales is a 1913 book featuring fairy tale illustrations by Kay Nielsen that predate their work on Sleeping Beauty. The concept art by Avon Earle reflects his overarching vision, a vision that features the detail of having the same crispness of an element in the foreground and a tree 10 miles in the background. Here is an excerpt from Sleeping Beauty's Once Upon a Dream scene that reached the goal of the look of a living tapestry. And here are more of the beautiful backgrounds from this movie, and more detailed work by Earle. Next, we will be exploring 1991's Beauty and the Beast. The film helped initiate a decade that Hollywood would call the Disney Renaissance. The movie was planned to start in the Rococo era with an opening scene inspired by 18th century's Jean-Henri Fragonard's The Swing. The scene was eventually scrapped but was used in later Disney projects. Here is another interpretation of The Swing and concept art done by Peter J. Hall for Belle's Music Box. And another couple concepts by Mel Shaw of Belle's Music Box inspired by The Swing. In 2010, The Swing was once again used in a CGI test of Rapunzel for Tangled, but was once again scrapped until it was finally used in 2013's Frozen. Here are some story sketches for the opening sequence of Beauty and the Beast. Originally planned to have a storybook opening of princess movies of the past, which would have included a callback to The Swing and a clip of Belle's father pushing her on a swing. However, this concept was scrapped for the opening we have today. Here is another painting of the same name. This is Jean-Baptiste Patter's The Swing from 1730, as the subject captured the interest of many 18th century French artists. Adults of the era liked to spend time playing child's games during their courtships as a way to escape the monotony of everyday life. Similar to the way some adults revisit classic cartoons or Disney theme parks, returning again and again to the stories and experiences of childhood. Some of the creative leadership at the Walt Disney Studios were concerned 90s audiences would not be able to connect with 18th century France. They were particularly concerned with the Rococo wardrobe, which featured extravagance and pastel colors. They were worried audiences would not think the prince was masculine and hero-like, and the details of the wardrobe were also difficult to animate. This is similar to how many 18th century people were also alienated by the French fashion at Europe's royal courts. Wigs became a joke and something to mock the elite about. Disney ultimately scaled back the Rococo wardrobe for the prince, except when he receives an over-the-top makeover in preparation for his evening with Belle. In this engraving from 1772 by Michael Vincent Brandoins, "Now, sir, you're a complete macaroni," you can see a hairdresser giving his client an exaggerated version of a real hairdo from the time. In 1774's Ridiculous Tastes, or The Lady's Absurdity by Matthew Darley and Robert Sayer, you can also see a woman getting an over-the-top hairdo. Even in the 18th century, people were making fun of the fashion. One example is playwright Robert Hitchcock in The Macaroni, where he mocked the styles of fashionable young Englishmen. They were dubbed macaronis after their love for Italian culture. Here are three interpretations of Louis XIV's state portrait by French artist Hyacinthe Regard from 1701, a story sketch from the unproduced 1940s The Emperor's New Clothes by James Bodero, concept art for 1973's Robin Hood by Ken Anderson, and concept art for The Beast by Mel Shaw. Here are concepts for Belle and Gaston by Jean Gilmore, originally planned to have more accurate Rococo costumes, which were later changed into versions that were easier to work with in hand-drawn animation. In another one of Disney's magical transformation scenes, Glen Keane animated the Beast turning back into the prince, his large frame spiraling through the air and seamlessly becoming the handsome prince, shown here in some original black and white pencil animation. Inspired by Glen Keane's visit to the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena, where he admired Auguste Rodin's The Burghers of Calais for 30 minutes before returning to the studio to animate the famous scene. In this concept for the Beast, done by Peter J. Hall, you can see the original direction for the Beast, a large monkey. Later, Glen Keane, after a visit to the London Zoo, would say, "I started thinking about the American bison and the scale of the big beast, and the sadness in the buffalo's eyes. I was also thinking about the softness of a lion's mane, and about the tusk and hair growing up the snout of a wild boar, and studied the anatomy of bears. All these things were swirling in my head, and as I drew, it all suddenly came together in probably 15 minutes. Although the original story of Beauty and the Beast did not include talking household objects like seen in the Disney film, anthropomorphizing was popular in French literature and decorative arts in the 1740s and 1750s, including the popular story 1742's The Sofa, A Moral Tale by Gabrielle Suzanne Barbot de Villeneuve. In it, a man's soul is cursed to journey from one sofa to another until he witnesses a true declaration of love. Here is an example of a Rococo sofa from the 18th century etching and engraving. And here are some story sketches of Belle and Gaston. Sofas were commonly used in 18th century France for flirtatious moments during courtship. More objects come to life in Disney's Beauty and the Beast and round out the supporting cast of the movie. The animators excelled at humanizing household objects and giving them full, wide ranges of emotions. Similar to Beauty and the Beast, here are paintings and drawings done for the film Through the Mirror, starring Mickey Mouse stepping through a looking glass and encountering anthropomorphic furniture, including a footstool. Speaking of footstools, here is the model sheet for the footstool from Beauty and the Beast and the carpet from Aladdin. Model sheets are used to ensure that a large team of animators had a shared understanding of the design of each character. Seemingly inspired by the first porcelain teapots made in Europe, Mrs. Potts is a great addition to the film as a sweet, warm-hearted figure. Here is concept art from Mrs. Potts and Chip, the colors inspired by French Rococo, white, gold, and pink. And here are the model sheets for Mrs. Potts and Chip. Here are more teapots from the 18th and 19th centuries. Many teapots were designed in whimsical ways, often illustrating quirky, humanized, or animal-based designs. In many ways, they are reminiscent of Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast, from their color stories to their uses of roses on vines. Here is the concept art for Cogsworth and his model sheet. Originally, the character was going to be a long case clock, but was reimagined to be a mantle clock so he could interact better with the other characters. And here is a pedestal clock from the late 19th to early 20th century. You can see its oval face suggests a human form and includes lion's paws, similar to that of the Beast. Here is a wall clock from 1747. It features a cupid symbolizing the popular theme of the era, love conquering all. Here is an etching and engraving from between 1742 and 1748, where you can see an example of a popular Rococo-style 18th century clock. Finally, here is concept art for one of my favorite characters, Lumiere. In this concept art by Kevin Lima, you can see Lumiere was tinted blue instead of yellow, suggesting he was originally planned to be made of silver instead of gilded bronze. As metal does not translate well into traditional animation, and the deep yellow of his final design reads more easily to the intended material. Here is the model sheet for Lumiere by Nick Ranieri. And here is a pair of candlesticks circa 1770 to 1784. They were made from porcelain in London and marketed as luxury goods. You can see the human-like gestures in these, blurring the line between real life and decorative objects. And here is a pair of candelabra from 1745 to 1746. In these, you can really see where some of the inspiration for Lumiere may have come from. Because of the art of hand-drawn animation, Lumiere's details had to be toned down from original Rococo pieces like these, which are full of detail and also give the illusion of motion with its swirling lines. Beast's Castle is a combination of Gothic, Baroque, and neoclassical styles. It is important to story development that the feel of the interiors reflect the gradual improving mood of the beast. In the original tale, the Beast's Castle is also very important, with long explanations about the opulence of the castle and the furniture and objects stored within. Here is concept art for Belle's bedchamber and the ballroom modeled after the Hall of Versailles, which is a callback to the beginning of this exhibit to Walt Disney's grand tour of Europe where he visited Versailles. Here is a layout drawing of Beast's famous library and the ballroom for Cinderella. Each show that background paintings can be used for dramatic camera moves without the use of CGI. And this is the final version of the ballroom scene, at this time using cutting-edge CGI. The ballroom inspired by the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, and the scene used as a romantic point the whole movie has been leading up to. The Be Our Guest scene of Beauty and the Beast is a grand musical number led by Lumiere, inspired by French entertainer Maurice Chevalier, that recalls the lavish festivities at Versailles and other European courts. Here is the 18th century porcelain plates and dining ware. Here are pairs of tower vases with covers from 1763 and 1762. They are among the most sophisticated vases ever produced by the Sevres porcelain manufactory and are the only known pairs of so-called tower vases. The pink color was extremely popular in the Rococo era. The roots of nearly every Disney castle from a movie or theme park is based on the Neuschwanstein in Germany, made for Ludwig II of Bavaria, who was known as the fairy tale king who was seeking an escape where he could flee to his own private world. Here are concepts for the castle from Beauty and the Beast and visual development for Cinderella. And here is a concept for Cinderella's castle done by Mary Blair. And here is even more concept art for the Beast Castle. Theme parks are primarily the invention of 18th century Europe. When Walt Disney was developing his idea for Disneyland, he visited many European theme parks and zoos, specifically Tivoli Gardens, which was built outside of Copenhagen in 1843. Today, Sleeping Beauty's castle is as recognizable as the Eiffel Tower. The castles of Disney's 6 theme parks incorporate inspiration from Neuschwanstein Castle and details of Romanesque, Gothic, and Renaissance buildings. Here is a drawing of the north elevation of Sleeping Beauty's castle in Anaheim and a comparative drawing of the castle sizes of Disneyland and Walt Disney World. The Castle of Magical Dreams, reimagined in Hong Kong in 2020, owes its original look to embracing cultural diversity, with each turret representing a different Disney heroine, and Sleeping Beauty's castle from Disneyland Paris, which was inspired by original watercolors of the castle made for the film. Cinderella's castle in Tokyo Disney from 1980 is an almost direct copy of the castle from Florida. And here is a concept for Enchanted Storybook Castle made for Shanghai in 2012. It's the largest of all Disney theme park castles and has a recognizably European look. Here is a reproduction of a stained glass window from the background of the opening sequence in Beauty and the Beast. And here is the thing I was initially most excited to see, Herb Ryman's original bird's eye view of Disneyland from 1953. This is an original drawing that Walt and Roy O. Disney used to get capital out of investors to make the park, which was drawn from Walt's ideas over a weekend. And that was my visit to the Huntington Library. I hope you liked it and, like me, got inspired to research more after visiting this exhibit.